Abka Swagohe? Swagohe. So, I met with my colleagues earlier, and they demanded I had a small history lesson, some pronunciation lessons. They said I need to be able to pronounce the names, and also a bit of cultural lessons. So I want to share a little bit about that with you first. So Mr. Krishna Murthy Raga Vendra, aka Raghu, and Gujendra, and Abhishek. And so, as we were talking, we had some fun, and Gujendra shared with me that Hindi culture goes back 5,000 years. He said, and what's amazing is that not a lot's changed. He said, 5,000 years ago, things used to get done in 4 ways. And they were Sam, Dam, Dund, and Bed. And for those of you who don't speak Hindi, I'll explain it a little. So, Sam, these were 4 ways you got things. So the first one, Sam, was to please somebody. You'd please them and they'd give you what you want. The second way, Dam, you'd pay them. Then they'd give you what you want. The third way, Dund, was you would punish them if they didn't give you what you want. And then the fourth way, Bed, was you'd threaten to reveal a secret that you knew about them if they didn't give you what they wanted. So that was my cultural lesson this morning. So on a slightly more serious note now, we're going to talk about what I've come here for, and it's about how technology is impacting human resources and the workforce. And what we're finding is the digital ecosystem has basically changed lives, every aspect of our modern life, the way we interact with friends, with our kids, with people around the globe, in business. Digital's become part of our life. And for a lot of people in the room, you was probably born digital, so from the minute you grew up, you was interacting with all these different modern devices. And what we've found is that this digital tsunami, if you want to call it that, the complexities of it have actually created a lot of opportunity, especially for organizations that can effectively communicate with the workforce using this modern technology. So we're going to talk about a few different questions today, and the way we thought would leave the panel open is, if you think of any questions while we're talking or discussing, write them down and pass it to one of the team members, and they'll bring it to us. And we'll also have some question and answers. We're going to try and leave a lot of time for questions and answers, and maybe the panel's going to speak 2 or 3 minutes each or so, and then we'll open it up and have a discussion. I'll just start with, recognition in the modern workplace has changed now. Instead of it just being top down, it's also become peer-to-peer and junior to senior. Now that wasn't available in the pre-digital era where everything was in paper. Most of it was all top down and took a long time. However, if companies and organizations can build the right recognition frameworks and efficiently implement them, this is going to trigger positive behavior in the workforce. And so I've got a few questions. The first one, I think I'll have this for Abhishek, sorry. How does your company utilize technology to recognize employees?
So I think I'll take a step back and say that recognition is more of an outcome. I would take a term of engagement, and then I'll tell you how the technology landscape really helps employees to stay engaged. So our engagement actually starts pre-hire. In fact, we've pretty recently partnered with one of our technology partners, Amber. I think some of us may be familiar. So what they are building is tracking the inputs from the first interview till exit. And what we also have in-house is an HRIS through which we are actually linking all the employee touch points in the form of their processes. So starting from the point of recruitment and onboarding and going up till the exit management, which invariably convert the process into a completely automated channel. So what we then do is collect all the points from that medium to really touch base and find out where are the areas of improvement proactively. Right? Now, if I may say so, I think this proactive measure does add a lot of value to the overall engagement, because engagement is actually a continuum journey, right? I can't really say if somebody who's engaged today would be continuing to stay engaged a year later, so on and so forth, right? So I think, yeah, this is exactly what is work in progress, and we have attempted so far.
Okay, thanks for that. The other thing we bordered on was about different age groups and different backgrounds, and specifically millennials, how they've, can you hear? Sorry. And how millennials have affected the workforce. And so one of the questions we had was, do you talk to different segments of your workforce in a different way? How do you communicate with them? And sorry. Is there some background noise? Okay. Yeah. So it's, how do we communicate with, or do we communicate with these different segments of the workforce where, you know, millennials are used to, we discussed earlier that maybe 60% of the people in the room earlier are on the phones interacting with the phones while they're listening to the debate, and that's them actually talking and communicating in the social environments. Well, do employers need to do that? If that's where they're focusing their attention, does an employer need to speak the same language on the same devices instead of trying all the traditional things that might not work today? So the next question for Raghu was, Raghu, I'll get the pronunciation, was, does your company communicate differently with different segments of the workforce, and how do you recognize them, and is it instantaneous, is it periodic, or how do you communicate?
Thank you for the question, and what I'd like to say is different strokes for different folks is how we need to look at it. It depends also not only on the millennials or the age of the employee, but the event itself in terms of how one needs to get recognized. Because instant gratification is one thing which will play a significant role, and that's where technology is a great enabler, where you can send electronic wishes or in whichever part of the world and give a pat on the back electronically. But in addition to that, while we could use technology as a form of greeting itself, we also look at technology being an enabler. As Abhishek said, we use a lot of data to actually collect a lot of events, activities to collect information, and then use that to look at how we need to recognize or encourage folks. For example, if it's a formal event, an org-wide event where there's a competition or where there's a great achievement that is done, then the recognition is in a formal setup like in a hall. But if it is something which is as simple as an anniversary, or it is something which somebody has done a good job, you could walk across, you could get something pop up on his or her screen, or the manager walks around and recognizes people. So there's no one set formula in terms of saying that this is the way to recognize an individual. The focus is to look at, of course, the age of the employee, but more importantly, what is the intended outcome? And large achievement, then it would require a formal setup where you recognize that individual, is how we look at it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we then got into another debate. Obviously, Tata, they produced, was it 38,000 cars? How many cars was it? How many motor vehicles are you producing here?
Vehicles,
Yeah, approximately.
about 800,000.
Okay. So we got into a discussion about cars and about different parts of the workforce. And one of the things we started talking about was, you know, a lot of people on the production line, they get the job well done. And so we then started asking, can technology work for blue-collar production workers? And that was a question in, do you think it can work for production or factory workers? And if it can, how could we utilize it?
Yeah, so first of all, I think my view is that technology should be used as an enabler. It's better used as a servant, not as a master. Rein in technology before technology reins you in. It doesn't matter whether it is the blue-collar workforce on the shop floors or white-collar workforce in the engineering center, research centers, sales and marketing offices, doesn't matter. I think, and I think audience here would also endorse that, and I'm going to quote a little bit in Hindi, nothing works better than jadoo ki jappi, right? A warm handshake, far more effective than 10 messages received from 10 different people on your WhatsApp. Or on the Facebook, you get so many likes or dislikes, whatever it is. So what is the technology being used for is very important and critical. Like Raghu mentioned, for example, if it's a something which you can just message, you just message. But even if it is, for example, somebody's birthday, just walk down and have a warm handshake in the corporate world is far more effective than sending a message on the email or on the, if you're not able to meet, then it's a different matter. But still, if you call somebody, has far more effect than sending an email or a message through any social medium. So it works for both white collar, blue collar on the shop floor, doesn't matter. It works equally because human beings are human beings. Mm-hmm. The psychology of human being has not changed in thousands of years. That's what I was telling you. Sam Dam Dandved. Thousands of years back, the kings used to rule the same way as the MDs and chairmen and all these people, they manage their companies today. Yeah. It has become more transparent. It has become more democratic, yes. But the ways of motivating people remain the same. Okay. Because the psychology is very similar. Human psychology remains the same. So the other aspect is what Raghu also mentioned about instant reward and recognition. You have instant coffee and you have a brewed coffee. Which one do you prefer?
Okay. Well, how many people do you have on the production line in India, just approximately?
Yeah, so out of 70,000 people that I have in our company, about 50,000 are in the manufacturing plants.
Okay, so I've got a quick question for you. How long is it going to take you to shake 50,000 hands?
I don't have to shake with 50,000. Their managers are doing that.
Yeah.
See, I look at the organization through the eyes of my manager.
Right.
Not through the managing director or chairman who is sitting far away.
Yeah.
So if every manager in the company is able to do that, that's what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, even if there is a communication, and I have seen that, I have experienced it. We have town halls, global town halls which are web telecast, there are questions asked online, etc., etc. But immediately after those town halls, for example, we have in rotation in our respective, in different units. Immediately after that, all the executive committee members, they take 15, 20, 25 people in different groups and then sit down with them for about an hour is far more effective than that town hall which was done a few minutes before that.
Okay.
And we have seen that when the managers do that face to face, far more effective. I'm not saying that electronic medium is not important. It's important for information. But for connecting emotionally, I don't think that's enough.
Okay. Well, I think that's debatable depending on who you are, especially from the millennials, because sometimes you'll call a millennial and they won't pick the phone up. If you text them or email them or Slack them, they'll respond to you. So I think, this modern communication channels is changing. And my point was more, you've got to go kind of with the flow, the way society's changing and communicating, you've got to at least accommodate all parts of it, whether it's a handshake or whether it's an email or electronic recognition. But I will say this, that just as God's given man and woman dominion over the beasts of this earth, how we control them, that why technology controls a lot of things, it's still man and woman that controls the technology. We still tell it what to do. So we write the code and we instruct it, and then it does as we've instructed unless it goes corrupt. But
So let me give you an example which I shared earlier. Armed forces people, they are the most motivated people. They are most engaged, most dedicated. They don't get any emails. They don't get any WhatsApp message. But they are there to lay down their life for their fellow countrymen, for their country.
okay, well, I've got a little bit, we're not going to get into an argument, but one other opinion to that. So one of our head of technology, he's Sikh and he's a very proud man and very accomplished man. And he actually joined the intelligence, when he was in India, he joined the intelligence corps as an intelligence officer because they use a lot of, the skill sets that developers have got for modern technology is very beneficial to the government and to the armed forces. He joined, he was all excited, I'm going to serve my country. And then, because he wasn't getting the interactions he wanted, he quit, and he's back now in technology. So, there's always two sides to it. There's two sides to a story. There's your side, my side, and what really happened. How about that?
1 or 2% people will leave the armed forces also. Doesn't matter. 99% of the people, they serve their lives for their country, for their countrymen.
Okay,
And they are not the best paid.
agreed.
There are two sides of the same coin. We need to move on.
So, couple more questions, then we're going to open up the floor. So, I'll start with you, Raghu. Could you find more recognition budgets if technology could prove the ROI of those initiatives to the C-suite?
For me, ROI is just not return on investments, but return on imagination too. And therefore, while technology can be used for an R&R initiative or intervention, I would still say that for me, technology will only be an enabler in the first instance, and that will make a huge difference. I think we need to first pilot in a few areas in terms of how and what is it we need to do in terms of enabling technology. As Abhishek said, that at every touch point of an employee, right from the time an employee is supposed to interview in the organization, till the employee serves, stays, grows, and quits, if we could look at that data, store it, analyze it, and use some tools and analytics in terms of what is it we can do with that information, and prove it to the leadership and the CFO that by using technology, the impact in terms of motivation, your CSAT scores, your pulse scores, your retention scores, and for people to grow from within the system. If I can draw a linkage by doing certain R&R activities, then I would use technology as an enabler, use that information, and make my case. And every time I put up a business case, combining both the eyes, the investments and the imagination, I think we would get budgets. So for me, technology is just one more enabler. I would use that as my basic premise, because in an R&R, or in the way we need to recognize people, ultimately it is the intent, the sincerity with which you do. Because I would not be too chuffed in terms of getting an email which is reproduced to 100 other guys as a mechanical saying that, hey, you finished 8 years or 12 years in the company. I would prefer a handwritten note from my boss which says, Raghu, you've done a brilliant job. Thanks for staying and contributing. While the technology will support me in reminding me of the anniversary, it's our ability to put forth a business case with a lot of color. I think then it would be a good dovetailing of both hard facts and the intent behind what is it we need to be doing. Because ultimately, as the topic says, employee engagement now or never, I think for me, technology is an integral part, but it's not the only part or not the primary part. It's how I would look at when I put up any case for investments. And because of technology, because I'm able to marshal all my data, I can also project what I think I will be doing. I'm sure it rings a bell with the CFO and the budgets gets released. Okay. It's how I would look at it.
Thanks. I do have another question for you, Abhishek, but you can...
So I had an example to give, and this is where I'm pro-technology. And if I compare that scenario, so again, coming back to one of the tools that we use in-house, Amber, what we did, we did an engagement survey, which is typically done by many organizations, to predict or forecast where is the risk of some of our, where is basically the risk, the talent risk, where do we lose it? So we implemented that in one of our businesses. So we received approximately 60 to 70% responses in that business after serving around 1,500 employees. And we could meaningfully know 40 to 50 high-risk employees. Now, coming back to the point that you made, how to allocate meaningful or optimize our budget allocation, I think precisely the point. I'm not saying that everything was a result of a mismatch in terms of a pay not up to the standards, but at least I know the reasons for dissonance, and I can attack the problem before it hits me.
Mm-hmm. Great.
So, yeah.
Well, maybe I'll give this question to Gujarin. It came from the audience. Sorry?
It's okay.
Gajendra. It says, what are the different ways you acknowledge individuals for their achievements? Could you briefly tell us about your best practices?
So I don't think we do something out of this world. It is like most companies would do. There are celebrations of various kinds, including birthdays and et cetera, et cetera. There are awards which are given out to the people in different locations, different functions. For example, we have the Stars Award for our sales people. Yeah. We have productivity rewards for our manufacturing people, et cetera, et cetera. So, and these are non-monetary rewards. Yeah. There are various kinds of competitions which run inside the organization, improving the market share, improving productivity, improving margins in the business, et cetera. And the highest reward is the MD's trophy that is given out in every town hall meet that we have every quarter. Then there are, of course, the financial rewards. which are linked to the performance of the individual in line with the performance of the company. But larger emphasis are laid on non-monetary, larger emphasis are laid on face-to-face recognitions rather than, I mean, for example, the STARS awards are given out in every region, in every sales region, for example. One of the executive committee member would fly down, spend time, give away the rewards, have dinner with the employees, their families, etc., etc. Next day, it is flashed through the media, by our corporate communications across the company. But then it is important to give those rewards and celebrate real time and in real terms, rather than only sending out flash messages, emails, etc., etc. So we make it a point that all these kinds of rewards, especially the non-monetary rewards, are done face-to-face with as much warm environment created as much it is possible in every location of the company, every office of the company, every unit of the company.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for that. We're just going to hand it over to the floor now. If we've got any questions, this chap in the blue shirt first, and then. Do you want to? Yeah, you've got.
Good afternoon, panel. My name is Ashok. My question to the panel is, every year organizations conduct employee engagement surveys to check the effectiveness or the engagement level of the employees. My question is, do we really need to conduct employee engagement surveys to identify the engagement levels, or take interventions and check what is the effectiveness of the interventions and then create an engaging work environment?
Thank you. I think increasingly organizations, I think, are moving away from an annual survey as the only way of having their ears on the ground. In our organization, we do 3 things in terms of a survey, in addition to other listening posts that are there. We do a fortnightly survey called the Pulse, which is very topical, immediate, on things which matter to them on a day-to-day basis, including an intervention which we have launched. So it's every 15 days, a Pulse survey is done. Every quarterly, we do an engagement survey per se called the Litmus. And annually, we do a culture survey in terms of are we true to the values of what the organization stands for. So it's a combination of things which you do in terms of a formal survey. In addition to this, before we launch any intervention in the organization, we first try to understand what is it that we need to either correct or what is it we need to change or implement, and then have a cross-functional team which works on it and comes up with a proposal. We do a pilot in a small function, unit, location, get feedback, and introduce it in the larger organization. So it need not be a formal survey as the only way as a listening post. But when we sat for this discussion, we also said, how do you leverage technology? Because it's a tech conference. So that's where role of technology comes in terms of our data generation, data analytics, and in terms of how you leverage information and work on projections, both in terms of impact and outcomes, and the costs that would need to, or the investments that would need to happen. Okay. Your town halls, your meet your leader, your walk on the floor, or other listening posts. But the fact is there's no one approach. It has to be a combination of approaches that will make your listening actually useful when you want to know what people feel. That's the way I would look at it.
Thank you. And there is a, sorry, there is a
if we can give somebody else, if you speak after the conference, I just want to give a few other people a chance. And if we can keep the responses back to less than a minute so we can just get a few people. This lady had something to ask before.
So my name is Sindhu and I represent JDS Software. I have a comment and a question. The comment is that, if organizations who had great R&R programs, they would have definitely seen a spike in their engagement scores. They would have been northwards of 90s, right? But I don't necessarily see that. And that's the comment, because to the point that Mr. Gajendra made on, that it needs to be just in time, and technology is not really helping in that human and the spirit of recognition. We're losing out on that. So that's really my comment to, and that's where I think R&R is not as effective when you bring in too much of technology. My question is, based on Daniel Pink's work on motivation, right? The surprising truth on motivation. If R&R is really the truth behind motivation, what about purpose, right? Is R&R the only solution to motivation, or should we look beyond R&R and look at how you define purpose, which will actually pull the entire workforce in that direction, and not necessarily what you get rewarded or recognized for. And I'll tell you why. I used to work for Facebook, and we never had a formal R&R, but every single person who came to the organization walked in with pride and connected to the larger purpose of the organization. So that really worked wonders for me. So I really wanted the panel's thoughts on that piece of work. Thank you.
I think I mentioned about the armed forces. There are no R&Rs there. Other than salary, they don't get anything else. I'll give you a live example from the corporate world. One of our group company. They don't have anything very special about R&R. Yet, they have one of the highest engagement levels of the employees in that company. They have one of the highest PE ratios in this country. Yeah, with a annual turnover revenue of less than 20,000 crores, that company is valued at about 85 or 90,000 crores, right? Even we normally say that you need to differentiate the performance a lot. So if the average increase given in a year is 10%, you'll give some 0, some 20%, 25%. In that company, if 10% is the average, least would be 8%, maximum would be 12%. If the performance bonus for the year is at 100%, least would be 80, 85%, maximum would be 120%. That's what it is. Yet, they have been creating success stories year after year. Last 16, 17 years that I have seen that company, the market price of that their stock was 3 rupees, 3.5 rupees a share, 10 rupee share. Today, 1 rupee share is 600 rupees. All employees have done that. So, your observation question that R&R, I'm not saying R&R doesn't work. I think it is the leader who is able to create the vision and purpose and rally the people behind is far more important than structured reward and recognition mechanisms. Those are important when the organization becomes large, complex. You need to do that. Yeah, he asked, for example, are the employee engagement surveys important? Raghu answered that. It is important, but not so important that you rely only on that. Because humans run the organization, not the technology, not the machines. So let humanity and humanness be increased in the organization to get the better business results that are expected from the businesses.
Just to add today, I think all of us in our individual capacities would define employee engagement, right? There are multiple definitions. But if you look at it very closely, it seems very employee-centric, right? I mean, look at all the employees providing discretionary efforts, so on and so forth. To me, the way, and this is the way we have experienced in our organization, is the fine point where the purpose for the company and the job holder is when both individual and the company are trying to drive success for each other. I think that is what you mean by saying that finding the right purpose. And once that is established, I think you can easily say the person is engaged, highly engaged, so on and so forth. So I think it's finding the sweet spot, and therefore a lot of tools, a lot of mechanisms are available, I think, to assess the right people and assess people right. I think this is the way I would like to put it.
I think the core is ultimately, is there a career? Am I respected? Is there opportunities for learning and development? I think is the fundamental requirement for any person to feel valued. R&R can only be an enabler. It is not the core of any activity. So as you rightly said, finding the sense of purpose, because people go to work to achieve what they think they need to do, in addition to the bread and butter stuff. So is my aspirations or what I'd like to achieve in life available in terms of progression and growth as an individual and as a professional is the primary requirement. If that doesn't exist, any amount of R&R will be of no use. Like his company had the tagline, we also make steel. Because ultimately you need to have that core purpose in terms of what it is and then build things around it.
Yeah.
At best, it can be an enabler, is what I could look at.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm all about purpose, and I believe purpose is a great thing. But when you use Facebook as an example of purpose, I find that a bit challenging because Facebook's purpose is to exploit as much personal data from you and then go and sell it to other people. So that was just one issue. But I think a gentleman over there had a question, the last question, then we'll be at the sidelines later and we can answer any questions.
I have one more point. People don't work only for rewards. People work for purpose also. And the purpose is not just making money or just being recognized. People also look at how do they contribute, not just within the company, even outside the organization. And that's how you take care of the society. Mm-hmm. When people are able to see that they have been able to contribute beyond their normal day-to-day work, I think they feel far more fulfilled than only the contribution they make to the company's bottom line.
Well, let's just say that technology can enable that and actually gather and measure it all, and then everyone's happy. But we've got one more question here. Is it not? Do you want?
That's okay. So I just want to know in terms of how do we decide on the rewarding budget, and with technology coming in, it's also taking a part of this budget as well.
I think people might not.
Yeah.
You spend money on technology or reward?
Both.
Yeah. So how do we decide on the overall budget? No, often when we go to the CHRO or the CEO, we ask for the rewards budgets. I mean, it's always less. And with now technology coming in, and we also have it even more lesser. So how do you actually manage that?
Well, we have a saying that figures don't lie, but liars do figure. And what we mean by that is that as long as you can prove the figures, measure them, that they're accurate and you can rely on them, budget will follow performance. So as long as we know what performance we're measuring and the value of the performance to the organization, as the technology gathers that, or manual gathers it, that becomes the driver of how much more budget you invest to grow the business more.
I think as long as the focus is on making the pie bigger, then it doesn't matter. The question is, if the pie is getting smaller, then you are distributing poverty.
So we've just been given the cue. We've got to finish now, but we'll go on the sidelines here.